something worked today. Bringing help, hope, and healing. That's the mission of disaster relief. Not just South Carolina, but all across our nation. So we're going to start off with, okay, that's not my game picture. That's just a pretty picture. That's actually looking out the lodge where we stayed. It was just beautiful. The whole place was beautiful, really. This is our group. Yeah, I guess that moose picture didn't make it. I think most of you know by now that we spent all afternoon, we could not get my pictures downloaded, but y'all were glad because I had 400 pictures. So I'm really not really sure. I'll just have to click and see what comes up. But this was a picture taken at the church the afternoon we arrived in Colorado. There were 17 of us, and we were from all across South Carolina. This particular deployment was not like most because generally speaking, they send groups, and Rick, you can help me out with words.
Units.
What?
Units.
Units, okay, they normally send units out. And this was not a unit, it was just people that, as Michael, our son, said, God put together. Because they, we found out about it because somebody called Rick and said, hey, why don't you go to Colorado and help out? And Randy had asked some people to come, and the college kids were asked that was from their church. And actually their church, which is New Prosperity Baptist Church in Anderson, or in New Prosperity maybe, actually sponsored this trip somewhat, but still it was through disaster relief, and disaster relief funds paid for it, and Rick's going to talk more about that a little bit later. So we were a group of 17 volunteers from all over South Carolina. We stayed at the YMCA camp. We stayed in a lodge that was fairly rustic, but at the same time it was much nicer than what Rick has normally stayed in before. This was my first trip. But it had, I think it was 7 bedrooms, 8 bedrooms maybe. Anyway, each couple had a bedroom, and then there were 3 men that were there, and they stayed in a room, and then the 4 college kids had a room. And we shared 4 bathrooms. And every day we came home covered in soot. We were black. So we had fun taking turns and running out of water and deciding who was going to get the cold shower tonight, but we made it. And actually it worked out a lot better than what you might think. We were asked to come to Colorado by the state director, Dennis, and he is the guy here on the end. Right there, and then that's Randy, the South Carolina director, in the blue shirt, and his wife Pam right beside him. Another thing that was different about this trip was that we did not get to meet a lot of the victims. I am going to tell you the story of the one couple that we did spend some time with, and that's mostly what I'm going to do, is just tell you their story. But all of those things are different about this, and Rick may tell you some other things. I can't see back there. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to look at the pictures up here. It's back there. I just can't see.
Okay.
This is the church that we attended on Sunday morning, and I may talk more about that a little bit later. Okay, I'm just going to stop with that one, and can I go back? I'm going to go back to that one. Before I tell you the story of the couple that we met, I want to just give you just a little glimpse of the spiritual attitude that I came away with from this entire trip. I actually read, this was in my devotional, it was a Charles Stanley writing, but I want to read this to you first. If we have seen the miraculous workings of God in some extraordinary providential deliverance, I am sure the thing that has impressed us most has been the quietness with which it was done, the absence of everything spectacular and sensational, and the utter sense of nothingness that came to us as we stood in the presence of this mighty God and felt how easy it was for him to do it all without the faintest effort on his part or the slightest help on ours. It is not the part of faith to question, but to obey. God worked in so many ways, from the Sunday morning service to the wildflowers that bloomed among the burned forest, to the mountains, and then the animals that wandered the streets of Estes Park. God was there speaking to hearts and minds in the community and in the need of hope and help and healing. I wish I could say there had been 100 souls the week we were there, or even one, but there were none. But God was there working quietly in me and in our team and in the couple and throughout the community and in that church. We saw it and felt it, and yet it's hard to put words to it because it was just a very quiet, gentle spirit. He was a mighty God working through the hearts and minds of all of us. That's a moose, in case you can't tell. I thought we had another picture of a moose and we were going to play a game, but like I said, we just...
later on.
Oh, okay. See if you could find the moose. But this is a very super close-up picture, and actually it looks better up there than it does on my picture, because on my picture you really can't tell what it is. But I don't really have a bucket list, but if I had had a bucket list, going to the Rocky Mountains was on my list, and seeing moose. We actually went to New England 6 years ago in hopes of finding a moose, and it was too late. We didn't see any. This is the couple that Jerry and Lene is the couple's name. They are a retired military couple, and I'm going to try not to read, but at the same time, if I don't, their story was very long, and it took me most of the afternoon they had a 14-minute video, but we decided we wouldn't play that for you tonight. They are a retired couple who have adult children. They were actually in Nebraska visiting one of their children, their daughter, when the fire started. And they kept watching the fires because it was in their general area. And it began to move slightly. And so they decided it was time to go home. And actually their daughter and son-in-law followed them home so they could help pack up. But I guess they didn't really pack up furniture. They did pack up their valuables, and I'm going to explain that a little bit more to you. They were actually property owners, and the Property Owners Association was part of a fire-safe community, and they had lists, just like people would have, like they'll probably live on the coast. I don't know if Amy has a list of if there's a hurricane coming, things that she should get immediately to get out. But they had a list to pack up, and it was the immediate things, the little things that they could pack up. And they packed them up and had them staged, is the word they used, to move quickly in case the fire took a turn to come towards them. The fire was not predicted to come in their direction. It was predicted to go north of them. There were, in their association, there were, I heard both 38 and 50 on this video, but there were, you know, a large number. And we think about associations. In our association, we have some of our lots are 5 acres or 10 acres, but I don't know how big their lots were. I mean, we're talking possibly 50 acres or so. You know, it was not some little acre lot, but they're called property owners rather than home association. Most of the property that surrounded them was government owned or public property. And the government's attitude was to, when the fires come, let them burn. And they had been told for a while that, not sure where the picture is
It's
also.
on, you can,
I'll just go back to it. There's a picture in a little bit that I'll talk about. When we get to it, I'll tell you about it. But for 20 years, they had been told that they would have a fire. It wasn't if, but when the fire came. But it wouldn't be bad, not to worry about it. It would clean out the forest. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to continue to talk about the fire, but this is a picture of their property. You have a couple of them. This is our folks working. Yes, that's a bathtub down there. That's not one. I'm just going to go back to this one just for a minute. Well, that's the picture of the dead trees. You notice the dead trees there? I actually took pictures that showed what I'm about to tell you about, but most of the pictures I took was when we were driving and traveling, and they were blurred, so I just erased them. But 20 years ago, they had an infestation of a bark beetle, and the condition had gotten extremely bad because of the drought and the heat that they're having problems with now. And the beetles were, what I read didn't really say, but they were going into the tree and killing the trees. And the trees actually look like pickup sticks. Y'all remember those little plastic pickup sticks, and you'd kind of throw them and they'd be in all shapes? The trees were like that. There would be a few living trees, but you see the dead trees in this picture? There would be as many dead ones as live, and a lot of the dead ones were standing, but some were fallen, or some stage of falling down. And this is what actually caused this fire, was these dead trees. There were so many dead trees in the dry, hot condition. Let's see. Okay, so back to their properties. The 38 properties that was in their association, 34 of them burned. Now, not all of these were homes. Some were garages or stables, that kind of thing. But there were 14 homes just in their small association that burned. There were over 300 homes that burned total. I don't remember the exact number.
in that county.
In that county, yeah. So they traveled home from Nebraska on October the 15th, which was a Wednesday. And again, they had made their decision that when they got there, they needed to pack up their valuables. But almost immediately, the fire began to move and grow a little bit. So they decided to move because the fire, they knew it could come towards them. So they actually took their valuables and moved to another location, which really wasn't that far away, but they have a lot of lakes, and I guess one of them is a glacier lake, but there are a lot of lakes and rivers, and they had moved not that far, still in the county, but away from where they thought the fire was coming, and took their valuables with them. Well, that was on Wednesday, the 15th. On the 21st, which was the following Wednesday, they had moved and gotten settled in. They were actually working, they were judges is what they called themselves, at an election that day. And they were there and heard the news that the fire was starting to spread and move forward. And I didn't explain, but the fires are, like Rick said, they're named just like our hurricanes. But on top of that, they get updates. You know how, well, I actually have the app on my phone so I can watch the hurricanes and read the updates. But you know how you can, when the hurricanes are getting bad and close, they give you, you know, we expect it to make landfall at this point in time, and the winds are this point, and you know, all of these different things. Well, they do the same thing with the fires. Well, they got the news that this fire was moving and had built up both intensity and heat, and speed. It was moving forward. Also, the wind had eventually got up to 60 miles an hour by the time it had gotten into the county. And so it was moving fast. It was only moving, we decided at what, 20 miles an hour? But the winds inside the fire were at hurricane levels. So Jerry had put up a trail cam on their property, not because of the fires, but to watch the elk and the moose. And I'll take a little side thing here and tell you that they lived in a valley, and the ridge behind them was, we decided, about a quarter of a mile away from them, but their house was right on like a drop off, and I don't know how far it dropped down, but pretty far ways. And then there was just a flat area, and they called those flat areas meadows. And it was so pretty. It was spring. It was June here and there, but it was spring, early spring there, and the grass was so bright and green in the meadow. But they had this trail cam that recorded the animals, and Jerry told us that Christmas Eve, for the past 3 or 4 years on Christmas Eve, this herd of elk would go through their meadow behind them, and they were concerned and worried about where the elk were, and figured they probably wouldn't see them. But every Christmas Eve for the past 3 or 4 years, she said this herd of elk had gone through. They also watched a moose with a baby, a young one, had gone through. It would go through, and then the next year it would come back, like it would, I guess, go through in the spring, and then the fall it would come back. And so they watched the other moose, and they enjoyed watching the moose in the spring with their young, I guess. But this trail cam actually survived the fire. And I mean, we saw it. As a matter of fact, they watched us work. One day I saw it, and I said, there's a trail cam up there recording us. And she laughed when I mentioned it. And she said, yeah, we were watching y'all work, or we took pictures of y'all working. So that was great. But this trail cam actually recorded the fire as it came. And this ridge that was, I guess that would have been in front of their house. The house was gone, so I'm really not sure which way the house actually faced. But from the highway across, about a quarter mile, there was a ridge. And the trail cam recorded the fire at 6:52 on top of that ridge of that mountain. At 6:58, just 6 minutes later, their property was on fire. By 7 o'clock, it had moved all the way, had burned the house, gone all the way across the meadow, and was up on the ridge across the way from them. So in 8 minutes, that fire had traveled probably close to a mile. So it was really moving and very hot. Rick's going to show you some pictures and tell you a little bit more about that. It wasn't only the fire, and it wasn't only that hot, but there was also this tremendous wind that was with it. So it did a lot of damage. Let's see what else I've got here.
Anybody recognize that plant? If you saw the purple stalks, it looks like celery.
It's rhubarb. The one thing that was a true blessing in this, the following Monday, I believe it was, let's see, they had a heavy snow, a 7-inch wet, heavy snow that actually put the fire out. Otherwise, it would have continued. It did go through the national park there and across. It actually jumped the tundra. The mountains were so high they have, I guess, the tree line, timberline, where the trees won't grow. It's so cold and all of that. And it jumped that and over to the other side and continued to burn just a little ways. But on the day that their house burned, 120,000 acres of property burned in the one 24-hour period. Prior to that, only 40 acres had burned for. The fire actually started, It had actually been burned in several weeks. I had the date, now I don't remember it. But their property was totally destroyed. We could be showing you other pictures, but totally destroyed. I did not get the sense that this couple knew Jesus. They were a very friendly, very generous, gracious couple. They made Rick a strawberry rhubarb pie and other things. They paid for the tickets for us to go through the park. They gave us these little military coins that I still don't remember the name. A challenge coin, but it was just to thank us for all that we did. Just a very wonderful couple. I guess Rick's going to tell you about some of the other people that were there as well. But we were not given the opportunity really to share the gospel. As a matter of fact, we were told repeatedly to be friendly and nice, but they didn't want us chasing after these folks and, approaching them and being aggressive with our evangelistic tactics or schemes or whatever we have. They wanted to leave that to the Colorado team. One thing when you've traveled a lot or spent any time in a different area of the country, or if you've moved from one area of the country to another, I know Debbie's moved a lot, you know that people react differently to different things, and you talk to people differently than you do right here in Aiken or in South Carolina. And so the Colorado team definitely wanted to be the ones to share the gospel. Now, if somebody had come up to us and given us a really good opportunity, we wouldn't have turned our backs on it. But we were not really given the opportunity. So it is my hope and prayer, and I am certain that the Colorado team took the opportunity to talk to this couple and to see and share the gospel with them. But the reason I put this picture here, she had a garden that was probably 5-6 feet square, maybe 8 feet square. It wasn't big, or at least the part I could see. But the only thing really growing in the garden, other than a couple of wildflowers, was this really pretty rhubarb plant. And to me, that's a picture of hope. Because everything's burnt, everything's dead, but yet there's new growth here. This is another picture that I chose that every time I saw this situation, which was a lot, it said hope to me, because here's the burned forest, and yet it's spring, and so there's growth. In Christ, there's always hope. And that's the message that we hope that we can leave with them. And I ask that you pray with me for Jerry and Lene, that by us helping them just a little bit, maybe it gave them a little bit of help and hope. They were not sure of what they were going to do. We saved them thousands of dollars by cleaning their property, but most of you know the price of construction has just skyrocketed over the past, year, I guess. And they weren't sure that they were going to be able to rebuild, but they had some other things they thought they might do. So they weren't hopeless. They did have ideas. But please pray for Jerry and Lene. And I don't remember their last name. It's not important. God knows who it is. But just pray for them as they face the future.
As always, when we go out on these trips, it is rather sobering. This is the first one that Wanda had been on, and you can tell she was touched by the situation that you run into. She mentioned being a little cautious in how we go about presenting the gospel. We don't want to go up there and hit them in the head with the Bible and say, now that I got your attention, The first deployment I went on was to Connecticut. They had a severe tornado up there a few years ago. And there, what I learned real quickly and shared with other people was, if you go up to a house in Connecticut and you say, I'm Southern Baptist, you already have 2 strikes against you. So you have to, we go out and we share the gospel, by showing the gospel. So that's what we did here in Colorado. As Wanda said, we're kind of another scene there. If you look closely, you can see these trees in the foreground are burned. Then you have the green meadow, then there's burned trees. And up that side of the mountain, the side of the mountain is burned off, but then there's a green area up there where the fire actually went around it. And this is what we saw everywhere we went. You'd see an area that was burned, just totally wiped out. And then right beside it is a pasture that survived. Each day as we begin a day of work, we share a prayer at the site. We've had our breakfast, and by the way, we had cooks with us. We had a kitchen in the lodge where we stayed. Wanda didn't mention that. I'm surprised. Not only did we have 4 bathrooms, we had a kitchen. And they cooked the meals. And I had told Wanda, you won't lose weight while you're on one of these trips. You'll sweat it off during the day, and you'll make up for it at supper. Well, she found out that was true. These cooks that go out with us, and by the way, that's one of the roles in disaster relief, is cooking teams. So they did a fantastic job. But we'd have our breakfast, we'd go out, and we'd meet at the site, kind of look around a little bit, and then we gather and have a prayer. And if the owners happen to be there, we would invite them to join us in that prayer. We have a prayer for safety, for guidance, for direction, and wisdom as we go. And you can see the group just sharing that moment of prayer. Then, of course, before we approach a site, we want to make sure that we coordinate, and we coordinate all of the different tasks that are going on. So this is Dennis and Randy, as they were preparing us and briefing us for the first day. And this is another view of Jerry and Lene's house. This is what was left of their house. This was a 2-story log home. And there it is in the basement. And that's not a finished basement. It wasn't concrete floor or anything. I want to point out, back behind the folks, right up here, anyone want to guess what that is? Was?
Like a carport or something.
It was a camper trailer. That's what's left of that camper trailer. Just barely a frame, and you can see the roof of it sagged in there. Now, we had a mini excavator. It's sitting there in the background just a little bit. And one of the fellows there ran that, and Wanda became very familiar with it. We'll see that in a minute. And so we needed to collect, first of all, get all of the metal out of the site and put it in one dumpster. And then you had another rollback dumpster for ash and the general things that you collected up. So we needed to put the metal in there. So he took that mini excavator, and what he's carrying there is that trailer, that camper trailer. It was very interesting. Wanda was amazed at how he just took that, just kept folding this in, and then folding this in, and crushed this down, and then folding this in. Now, if you wanted to see an interesting video, she has a video on her phone when he loaded that into that rollback dumpster there that's over to the left side. Wanda is there in the foreground. Wanda's role, the whole time we were there, wasn't it?
Except for one day.
She was safety monitor, working with Doug, who ran that excavator. He's one of the Colorado people. And she watched and worked with him and made sure he was clear as he was backing up. They got to working together, and he was just ecstatic. He said every day that she was the best he had ever had working with him, you know. And she says, I don't know, you know, you're in pretty bad shape if I'm the best you ever had. But you can see that she was watching closely. Now, he had already piled all of this stuff up from getting it, and what we did, we knocked a wall down and built a ramp down into that lower level and brought the excavator in to get the metal out. And then we used a skid steer. Everybody knows what a skid steer is. We used that to go down in there and scoop everything else out. And we filled a dumpster. It was supposed to be 3/4 full. By the time we finished, it was rounded off. So I caught this picture. You've heard of a Columbine? We hear bad things about Columbine, Colorado, the town where there was a shooting at a high school. But that flower is a Columbine in front. And then caught the excavator and Wanda doing her job. You can see she worked really hard. She did break a sweat every day. It was hot and very, very dry. We were at between 87 and 8,900 feet elevation, so the sun was intense. There was nowhere to sit down on this site. Nowhere.
No shade.
No shade. Well, the shade was burnt. So there was no shade, nowhere to sit down. These folks, after we had gotten in, you can see the mini excavator there in the background, and after we started raking the ash out and just lightly leveling that dirt and everything in the foundation. Wanda mentioned the cost savings to these people. We encountered one of the neighbors, and we did some work for him. He had paid a contractor to come in and do most of what we did, and it was $30,000 for the cleanup. That did not include tearing out the foundation and crushing the foundation. That was another 30. So the savings to these folks was huge. This is another house that we worked on. This is before we started work, when we looked at it. And you can see they had a metal roof. That's the metal roof in the basement. This was also a 2-story log home. Jerry and Lene were military, both of them retired military. And this gentleman was a deputy sheriff. And he was out on call when the fire came through and took his home. They didn't have time to go through and clean out as much as Jerry and Lene did. They were not able to get all of their valuables out. So one of the things we did for them was the sifting. Wanda showed you a picture in Jerry and Lene's house. The ones that were in the white tie-back suits with the hats and everything on, and the young lady with the braids, those were our South Carolina team that was in there sifting and sorting through. They had identified an area that they suspected that there were several pieces of jewelry that had fallen through as the house burned. And the young ladies went in there and started sifting. They found 6 diamond rings, several other pieces of jewelry. Interestingly, as I said, he was a deputy sheriff. They found 5 sets of handcuffs. He said he didn't realize he had that many in the house. One thing we didn't find, though, he had a set of silver spurs, ceremonial spurs, that he wanted us to look for. Hopefully everybody knows what spurs are. We didn't find them. But we did find some little misshapen, molten pieces of silver. So, in the sifting that they did. So, this is the before picture. This is when we finished. So that's what we do. Now this was the first time South Carolina has deployed and done ash out for about 12 years, I believe is what Avery said. And they don't even do the training for ash out in the normal training anymore because we so seldom have the call to do that. Not in our area, but here in this area, you can tell. Oh, we dressed up for work. It turned out that, when I went, I had no idea. I thought I might be doing chaplain work. I thought I might be doing, although we knew that the Colorado team had already done assessing, so I probably wouldn't be doing that. And I was just, wherever you need me, I'll go to work. Well, it turned out I ran a chainsaw for just about the entire time I was there. I started on, I guess it was Monday afternoon. No, it was Monday morning. We worked on Sunday afternoon after church. We did our first, that gathering where we were getting the briefing. That was on Sunday. And then Monday, we had a second skid steer come in. And Randy, who had been doing chainsaw work, is the one who knows how to operate a skid steer. And I said, I don't know anything about it. You don't want me close to that piece of machinery. It would take me 3 days to learn it. So I said, I'll take over chainsaw and you can have the skid steer. So for the next 4 days, I ran chainsaws. And so that's our safety protection. We have to wear the helmet, face mask down, ear protection, and the chaps, which are Kevlar, and if the chainsaw should hit those chaps, it shreds that Kevlar and binds up the chainsaw and stops it almost immediately. So those are the safety equipment that we have to wear. They don't keep you from breaking your leg. Anybody know what a snowmobile is? That's 4 of them on trailers, 2 on each trailer. And you can see the molten metal. The engines were literally melted by the heat of the fire. And the fire went across this quickly, passed over it quickly. This is another house. We called it the Chimney House. It sat on the main road going between Granby and Grand Lakes, which is kind of a small Gatlinburg built for Denver people. You know, it's very rustic looking and a small resort community up there. And it's on the main highway between them, and actually, if you looked over on the other side past the chimney, there's one of the lakes that Wanda mentioned. This is a chimney house. These are the 4 young ladies, college students, who accompanied us on this trip. Very unusual for the experience I've had. Usually, I'm kind of median age. So it was great to have the young people. And they were smiling the entire time. There's a few times that I saw them with, you know, when they weren't frowning, and that was or when they weren't smiling, and that was probably because they were carrying 50 pounds of stuff out and struggling along.
We should mention they did not know each other. Well, 2 of them did, but they got along like they were sisters.
Yeah, they
They were just,
the whole group, as Wanda said, God brought us together. We didn't know each other. We had maybe met a time or 2, but didn't know much about each other at all. And it was like a 17-member family. We just had a great time. So you can see they're smiling. Now this is before they went to work on that house. You can see the house kind of sits on a slope, and right back here, there's the shell of a vehicle. Right beside that vehicle was another one, but you don't see it. I wish I had gotten the picture that Avery, the blue hat that was working with them, the unit leader, he took a picture. It was apparently a Jeep Liberty. I think I told a couple of you about it. That it was an aluminum vehicle, and where that vehicle had been, there was a pool of molten aluminum, and flowing down the side of the hill was like running water. It went down about 20 feet down the side of that hill. It was hot. This is my favorite place. Not. This was the briefing that we had before we started working on the last house that we worked on. And Dennis there in the middle, the Colorado director, and there were 5 of us that went out there. 6 of us.
well, Dennis didn't stay.
Oh, that's right, Dennis didn't say, so there were 5 of us, yeah, my fingers, yeah. So, this is the area. I want to point out that slope in the background. That's actually Rocky Mountain State Park. And it ends right there at the road that is access to this house. They sit right there by the park. But if you could see the detail on that hill, it's not just scorched. It's not just burned. It's just gone. There's a few little stubs of trees still standing up there, but that burned so hot that everything, those pickup sticks that Wanda was talking about, everything on that slope burned. Right down the road, to the left as you're looking at the screen, there was another gentleman that we had several people working with, and he is building a, would you call it a retreat center? For veterans primarily. He's actually active duty, Air Force, medical doctor, been in the Air Force for 40 years. And he's building this retreat center for guys and gals who come back from deployments and things like that, and they just aren't quite ready to adjust. And he's got snowmobiles, and he's going to have horse stables and all kinds of things for them to just come and relax and enjoy. And so we were able to do some work on his place. Wanda and I didn't work there, but we actually, on a couple of days, this particular day, we were split into 3 teams. We had the team at the Chimney House. We had a team, remember where the third one was?
There was one team at the Chimney House, and we were still working.
We were on this
We were
one.
there, and one team still went back to the sheriff's house.
The sheriff's house, okay, yeah. But this is where we started, and this one also had a standing chimney. He was hoping to save that chimney, but we all knew that he was not going to be able to do that. It's actually offset about a foot. The tree that's there at an angle right over Wanda's head, that's my tree. But this house, it was an elderly couple. He has a heart condition and she has cancer. And so we were able to start on this house. And you can see the trees are actually overhanging the home site, and so that's why we needed to take those out. Well, we got some of them around the house that were close to the house, but the team that followed us had to take those others down because that's the one that came down on my leg. That's a steel girder, an I-beam, that was across, the vertical was holding it up, and it was an I-beam across, holding the foundation of the structure of the home. Anybody know how hot the temperature has to be to melt steel to make it soft enough to break down? We had one of the students is a Clemson student in structural engineering, and he said 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit to melt that beam. He was with us on this one. We had quite a bit of equipment. You saw in the video that the equipment was actually rented by the county, leased by the county. And then we had the operators that were running the equipment. So that contribution that you saw given, that didn't go to disaster relief. That went to the county to offset the cost for the lodging. We paid for our own food. The disaster relief paid for our food. They did pay for our lodging. Wanda said our lodging was at a YMCA camp. Now most of us think of the YMCA down here in, where is that? It's not Beach Island.
Maybe Graniteville.
Graniteville. This YMCA camp had, oh goodness, I think it was
5,000 acres.
yeah, 5,000 acres, and they had all these lodge buildings around, and they had the main lodge, and they had basically a motel. It's a full community, and it's most busy during ski season. This is a very popular ski area. So the equipment was rented. That's Dennis's truck and the Colorado unit. Now obviously we flew out there, so we didn't take a trailer, a unit with us, so we used the Colorado equipment. And the incident command post was set up. This is the parking lot of that church that Wanda showed you the picture of that we went in on Sunday. And I thought it was interesting, the cross up there on the hill and all of the disaster relief equipment. And when we, at the end of the day, this parking lot was pretty well full of the equipment. So the equipment is provided, the various units within disaster relief have their own equipment and have their, all of the different things, and we have these trailers that we call units, and then we have people attached to the unit. So that's kind of the way it works. This is just another interesting picture, some of the scenery. Can anybody find the moose in that picture? See him up there by the
On the
rock?
right,
Yeah.
yeah, sort
Right
of
up there by
where
the
the
rock.
green grass is. Yeah.
Anybody want to guess what river this is? What river formed the Grand Canyon? Okay, this is geography lesson, come on now. The Colorado River. That's the Colorado River. The source of the Colorado River is in the Rocky Mountain State Park. I didn't know that. So that's the Colorado River. The night before we were due to leave, I walked out,
Pretty sunset.
and the first thing I saw was this pretty sunset.
That's good.
Then I looked at it. You know what's making that pretty sunset?
The fire.
Smoke. The new fire that was burning about 30 miles away. Every summer, there's fires. So, it's a beautiful sunset, but it's caused by the fire. So what is disaster relief? This is one of the trips we went on. How can you support disaster relief? Many of you did in the contributions with the church, and we thank you for that. There are many opportunities to serve in disaster relief. And in the near future, I hope to be calling on some of you because we have an opportunity right here in our association that is a desperate need right now. I'm not going to go into detail on it because I'm still trying to gather the details. But we may have an opportunity, and some of you could be involved in this. You don't have to run a chainsaw. You don't have to run a skid steer, although that might be one of the easier jobs sometimes. You don't even have to sift. Guess who does the laundry? We had someone, we thought we were going to be going out there without laundry, and we thought we were going to be bringing back some pretty odoriferous, is that a word? Suitcases. But when we showed up, we found out that there was one of the Colorado ladies, in fact it was Doug's wife, the one that was operating the mini excavator. His wife did laundry. About 18 loads a day of laundry. So we have people that run the laundry. We had the shower there in the lodge, but sometimes we have to take a trailer with us that is a shower unit. We have cooks. We deployed a team, a unit, deployed themselves in Conway area here in South Carolina just a few months ago to be the assistants in a vaccine center. And they did that for 17 days. They filled in. Those were disaster relief folks. Another area that I doubt if you used them, preacher, but there were disaster relief folks who did the nursery, child care at the convention in Nashville. Randy and Pam went there, and Pam worked in South Carolina, took care of the one-year-olds, basically, that group of the one-year-olds. So there's a lot of ways that you can serve in disaster relief. The best way to serve is to pray. Right now, we're kind of in a lull. We're taking a breath, and we're holding our breath because hurricane season was pretty tough last year, and we're just hoping that we don't have that again this year. Any questions? Real quickly. We're only 5 minutes over time. Yes?
What day did you break your leg and what were you doing?
Wanda has a video. I was running a chainsaw, and that tree that I pointed out
Back
there.
up to the tree.
Yeah, let's back up here, see if I can do that. This tree, you can see it's at an angle. Now remember, the fire was in October of last year. Then you had the winter time, and then springtime came, and by the way, they had snow 5 days before we got there. So this tree was dead, dried out, and angled over. And besides that, the wind had picked up while we ate our lunch. And I said, okay, I got to get those trees down. We'll drop them and see if we can cut them up and get them off the site before we finish this afternoon. And I could give you the list of things that I didn't do correctly. But as I cut the tree, I got less than halfway through the tree, and it split lengthwise and went up and hinged down and hit the ground. That's what Wanda's video shows. It hit the ground, and actually we found out that it broke, which is probably a blessing. And that end of the tree fell on my leg. And that's what broke my leg. But I was expecting to be in a plaster cast for 8 weeks when the first nurse practitioner looked at it at the doctor's care. And I could just see, oh boy, this is going to be a great summer, you know. And I started praying about it, and a whole lot of other people were praying about it. And here I am walking around now, 4 weeks after the incident. And yeah, I'm having to be careful, trying to be careful. But that's what happened. I don't know if I could have done it better or differently, but there were some things that I overlooked that now that I look back, if they ever let me run a chainsaw again, I'll be more careful the next time. But that's what it was. I was cutting trees and the tree fell on my leg, and it actually caught it between a tree that was on the ground and the one that fell. So, any other thoughts? General question about disaster relief? It's a mission. It's a mission effort every time we go out to bring help, healing, hope. Hope is the big thing. I think I left my Bible back here in the back. Let me get that. And just a scripture reference that came up in our devotions, the men's devotion book, just several days ago. People often ask us, well, why do you do this? In the video, they mentioned that it's at no cost to the owner. And many of them say, how can you do that? Why do you do that? In my role as a chaplain, I've learned, and God spoke to me, this was something that God told me, and I take the opportunity to share it. It doesn't cost the homeowner anything, but it's not free. It's not free at all. Jesus died for my sins. So I tell them the cost was paid 2,000 years ago. And I'm not being paid for it, other than the fact that God, through Jesus Christ, adopted me as his son. That's just amazing to me. And now God says, son, I got something I want you to do for me. What a privilege that God would ask me, stupidity with a chainsaw and all, to go out there and represent him as his son. Wow. So why do we do it? If I can read this small print. You might have to turn the lights on. And of course my eyes got messed up. 1 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter, and the 8th verse. How do we feel when we get to do this? When God calls us and allows us to do it? Having thus a fond affection for you, as we were well pleased to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives, because you have become very fond to us. These folks that we have been able to share a moment in their lives at a low point for them. As I said, these young ladies, young men, us old guys, we go out there and we can't help but smile. We didn't have a place to sit. It was hot. No shade. But you should have seen the smiles as we were able to share. Stephen, you want to close this in prayer, please? Pastor, did you have anything to add?
Lord, as we come to you again, praising your holy name, thanking you for everything, because you make everything possible. Lord, we've seen this group go out to Colorado and the work they do, Lord. It's a great thing. Everything's done in your name, and your name only. And if one life is saved, that's a great thing. Forgive us of our many sins, Lord. Lead, God, and direct us in everything we do. In Jesus' holy name I pray. Amen.
Amen.